Hey Brady, welcome to the show.
Hello, happy to be here.
Hey, well, real quick, what's a couple things you're grateful for so far from this year?
Ooh, a couple things I'm grateful for. Grateful for my health, for sure. Grateful that I'm getting married this year, so that's
Hey,
exciting.
congrats, man. When's the
Yeah,
date?
October 23rd.
All right. You guys have a place yet or it's still in the air?
We do. Yeah, it's wedding planning's tough, but it's all coming together.
Nice, nice. That's awesome, man. Cool, cool. So health, upcoming marriage. So
Yeah, and then I think I'm pretty grateful with so far this year. I've had a pretty solid competition season in strongman, so I've managed so far to qualify for everything I want to qualify for later in the year. So just qualified for World's Strongest Natural Man over in Scotland.
it's
And
sweet, man.
then I also just qualified for, and this isn't public yet, but I'm going to go ahead and say it anyways, because I think it's fine, Pro Strongman League Finals, which will
Okay.
be really cool. That'll be like right on the beach at Virginia Beach in May.
Dude,
So
all
I'm
right.
super excited for both of those.
All right. All right. Man, I feel like you could end the year already. It's like you already got so many wins in January.
Well, I want to see what I can do at the comps. You know, I've qualified now.
Yeah.
Now I need to see what I can do.
Sweet, sweet, awesome, man. Well, appreciate you sharing, and it's always a good kind of like theme to start off with gratitude and kind of like what the theme of your year is going to. And by the way, this is in Glasgow, Scotland, right?
Yeah, Worlds. Yep, in August.
Got you. I mean, how are you feeling about that? You've
I
been
feel good. I mean, the events have not been released yet. So the way it works in Strongman is usually the events will get released at least 3 months out for bigger comps, sometimes sooner. So you know have an idea of what to train for and get ready for. I overall I feel really good this year. I think I'll have a much better showing than last year even. So last year I went to Worlds and had a lot happen in life at the time, and I ended up not making weight, which was super unfortunate. That's the only time I've never made weight for competition. So there's not many weight classes in strongman, but I compete at a middleweight right now, which is 231 pounds and below. So I normally walk around at like 250 and then do like a water cut for comp, similar to like how like an MMA fighter would cut weight. And then next year though, I plan to go up to heavyweight because I'm tired of cutting weight and I think I'm ready for it.
sweet, sweet, man.
So this is like my last go around, my last big strongman season as a middleweight before I try to debut as a heavyweight next year.
The heavyweight starts at what?
Heavyweight is 265.
Okay, so it's not like such a big jump for you,
No,
so to
no, like
speak.
I'm already pretty close to being there in the off season. I just wouldn't have to cut for competition anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense, dude.
But
That's a
there are people that cut from like 280, 290 down to 265 that I'll be
shoe.
competing against. So I have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, yeah,
But I'll
because
be ready. I'll be ready.
dude, that sounds good, man. Yeah, awesome. Well, I mean, just give us a little bit of background info in terms of like your athletic career, because I mean, you started off. I think in college you're going. Was it college football, like
Yeah,
collegiate
so
football?
I was a linebacker in college. So I played at a smaller school in Ohio, John Carroll University. And literally it was the first game of the season. I got some reps in and ended up fracturing my spine, which was super unfortunate. And to this day, I still don't exactly know how it happened. I couldn't really tell on film. It was either an elbow to the back or a helmet to the back, but something sharp hit me. And I actually stayed in the game. This was right before halftime. It happened. Came out after halftime and finished the game, practiced for a week, and then realized like I just could not bend over anymore at all. And it needed to get it looked at.
Right.
There's very much this like problematic idea, I think, in football that you really look down upon if you go get looked at for an injury and you're not actually injured. So
Mm,
nobody gets checked until they're like certain that they're injured, which is kind of a big issue. But
yeah.
that's neither here or there.
Right. Right. Right.
Um, but yeah, I ended up having my L2 and L3 vertebrae, the transverse processes, which are the tips of the vertebrae, snapped off,
Shit.
and they're still off. They don't reattach. They were too far from the spine to fuse back. But luckily, I didn't need surgery, but I was in a back brace for like 9 months and really spent years rehabilitating that. But during that process is kind of how I discovered veganism in a roundabout way. So,
So that you were injured at the time and kind of like
so I was
perusing.
injured
Yeah.
as I was going vegan essentially and healing during that process. And I think that the increase in like antioxidants in my diet and just eating cleaner whole
Mm,
foods for the most part, not entirely, but I felt like that definitely contributed to the rate at which I was able to heal. That, and I started to lift really heavy too, actually, as I was healing my spine, which is kind of the opposite of what most people probably think you should do. So
Yeah.
I was
Well, I
doing
mean,
like,
walk us through that because, and I've had my own like slew of injuries, so I'm very curious like how you kind of experience the post recovery with lifting heavy. So I mean, just walk us through it.
yeah, I really didn't start to get better until I went vegan and started lifting heavy. So I think everybody thinks when they get injured, like, okay, I just need to lay off of it and rest it. But really, what I've realized over the years is you're not as fragile as you think you are typically when you're injured.
Mm.
And I'm not saying, oh, if you're in sport, you should go out and like compete still necessarily, just because competing is an unpredictable environment, especially in football.
Mhm.
But weight training is a very predictable environment. Like if something's going wrong, I just put the weight down.
Right. Yeah.
So
Makes
like
sense.
I'm in control 100% of the time and knowing what's a good pain, what's bad pain. So I started to get into powerlifting as I was healing my spine and as I was going vegan. So I was deadlifting heavy, I was squatting heavy. This was at the University of South Carolina. So once I fractured my spine, I lost my student athlete scholarship, transferred to the University of South Carolina to get in state tuition,
Gotcha.
and I started to
You grew up
do.
in
No, my family had happened to move there. Well,
Gotcha.
I grew up in Ohio, mostly
Okay.
outside of Cleveland.
Gotcha.
But they
Gotcha.
moved there, so I had to follow them to go get in-state tuition.
Gotcha.
So it was a process,
Sure.
but
Sure.
I definitely have grown a lot from that difficult time.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So I mean, there was a lot of stuff that happened then. So you got the injury. You obviously you had 9 months in the brace. Then you encountered veganism. How did that show up for you?
Yeah, so I at the University of South Carolina, I was working on my bachelor's in chemical engineering. Ultimately went on to do my PhD after that. But while I was doing my bachelor's, I started to get involved in some environmental research where we were taking um, methane emissions and trying to turn them into something valuable.
Mm.
And as I was studying these emissions, I realized that a good portion of these methane emissions are coming from cattle. And it didn't make sense for me to spend all day trying to reduce these emissions and turn them into something valuable and then go home and eat a cheeseburger. So that just wasn't ethically consistent with my values.
Goddamn cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, yeah. And then through that, I really, over the years, it really took some time for me to kind of come around to, oh, there's actually probably some health benefits here as well. And there's also a lot of animal rights issues
Mm.
that need to be addressed. And that's what ultimately I think has helped me stay vegan, I'll say,
Makes sense.
is those animal rights issues. Because once you understand those issues, there's no turning back, I feel.
Yeah, it's very multifactorial. It's
Yeah.
layered. You know, it's all
With the
connected.
environmental issues, you can always kind of justify it like, oh, well, I guess there's not as many emissions from poultry as beef. So, in a weird roundabout way, or oh, it's really all the companies causing the emissions. Like,
Yeah,
but once you get into the animal rights side of things, you're like, okay, there's no justifiable way I can continue to consume animal products.
you just can't unsee it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So that came first, and then how did that correlate to the powerlifting? Because then you started lifting heavy, and obviously being injured. I mean, I'm just curious, like how you got the inspiration to, oh, okay, I'm just, I'm still recovering, but let me just start lifting heavy shit and putting it down.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of my favorite parts of football was always in the weight room to begin with. So I was always really interested in that side of football was the training aspect. So, I realized, oh, there's this whole sport out there, powerlifting, where people just lift heavy shit and compete in that. And I was like, I might have a fractured spine, but I really want to do that. And I also really want to prove to people and kind of experiment on myself to see how strong I can get as a vegan.
Yeah, gotcha.
And at the time, there were like some vegan role models in the strength world. So like I had found out about like Nick Squires and Daniel
Mm.
Austin, and they were kind of the first people I looked up to think, oh, okay, maybe this is doable.
Yeah, yeah.
And now there's so many role models out
Oh my
there.
god, it's crazy.
So I think it's like, yeah, people today have way more people to look up to and follow in the footsteps of than I did back then. But having those two guys alone was huge for me and really helped me take the leap into veganism.
Makes sense. Yeah, yeah. Because I can imagine like at that time it would have been kind of even a little bit unusual, like seeing like, okay, there's like one, two guys, but there's like, like can anyone actually do this? So it's kind of like a new
Especially
term.
in the South. I don't think I'd ever met a vegan looking back at the time before I did it. Like, I don't think I actually knew any vegans.
Well, saying as somebody who lives in Greenville, South Carolina, there's a growing vegan community here, but it is definitely it is not as dominant as like, for example, when we lived in the UK or New York. It's like a lot more, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely interesting for sure. Cool. So, I mean, you got into lifting then. So then what happened? So you're lifting weights. Now you're starting to like do competitions, and then what?
Yeah, so I competed for 3, 4 years in powerlifting, and then I went on to grad school at the University of Delaware to work on my PhD in chemical and biomolecular engineering. And while I was working on that, I ended up winning nationals in powerlifting. And that was
Okay.
2023, so not that long ago, actually.
Okay. Okay. So I
So I
mean, like,
won drug
yeah.
tested nationals for the US Powerlifting Association that
Okay.
year.
I mean, was that something you were expecting, or?
No, not at all. I mean, that was massive for me, and that, like, in my mind, that was always kind of the end goal. Like, okay, if I can prove I'm a national champion in powerlifting, I've kind of done what I want in this sport.
Right. Right.
But after that, I realized, like, I need something else. Like, I still want to compete. So that at that point is when I was like, strongman is really fucking cool. I want to compete in that. So I kind of made this pivot, and I also felt powerlifting, I wasn't able to use a lot of the athleticism I developed in college football in
Mm,
powerlifting, because they're all very static movements. You're just moving a bar from point A to point B.
right.
Where in
Right.
strongman, there's so much more conditioning involved and like moving odd objects, and you have to be a lot more athletic.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I would say definitely with the powerlifting, it's very more like I mean, you have your big three lifts, but I mean, it's not like you're going into like some like crazy athletic endeavor or something like that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great strongmen who are like former NFL players. Tom Evans, to name one. He actually was the conditioning coach at the University of Delaware while I was there, and I've met him and trained with him a little bit. And he just won third at Strongest Man on Earth.
Wow.
So
Nice. Wow. That's sweet. That's sweet.
the
Did you
football
know?
background definitely plays over very well into strongman.
Yeah, I could see that it translates very well to this.
Yeah, definitely.
Out of curiosity, so you mentioned like obviously you changed your diet, so now you're eating plants, fully plant based. You know, you mentioned eating more whole foods, getting more fruits, vegetables. Obviously not perfect, but big drastic shift. You know, I guess from what you grew up eating. Did you notice any shifts for your health, or like what kind of shifted there for you?
Definitely. So as I went vegan in undergrad, I did it. I was very meticulous about kind of recording my progression in the gym, kind of documenting physical changes, like just aesthetically, monitoring my weight, just to, I kind of ran it as an experiment on myself a little bit, because I didn't know how this was going to go. Like I said, I didn't know anybody that was vegan at the time. And I did this very much stepwise. So I started by removing beef. Okay. I didn't expect any changes from that.
Didn't fall
And
apart.
then what's that? No, didn't fall apart from stopping eating red meat, despite what some people might think. And then I think I went on to chicken or dairy, and just kind of one by one started removing the animal products. And really, around the time I was like quote unquote pescatarian at the time, I think I'd cut out dairy, but was eating like fish and eggs. It was like, I'm starting to feel really good. Like,
Okay.
I want to keep going with this.
I really like how you took this very scientifically, by the way, because so many people they'll either go kind of like cold turkey, well, maybe bad description, but cold vegan, right? And
Yeah.
but I mean, it sounds like you went through this like methodically, like, all right, I'm removing
And I,
this.
I was doing this at the time too through an environmental lens. So it's like, I want to see how far I can go. And if something's not working, I'll just take a step back. And then I know I'm being like the most environmentally conscious I can be, but still making sure I can be strong and healthy and all of that. So I kept going after I was pescatarian, obviously, and made it all the way to vegan, and felt the best I had ever felt, and still feel the best I've ever felt. And have stuck with it now for what, 8, 9 years?
Wow, crazy. And now competing at the world stage.
Yeah, and now competing at the world stage, not only in powerlifting. Of course, I got the invite to Worlds, didn't end up going because I wanted to be a strongman.
Mm.
And now I'm competing on the world stage in strongman, just like 3 years after stepping away from powerlifting.
So they say that plants don't have protein, which kind of leads to your point with your career and your work with alternative protein sources and kind of like some of the groundbreaking work that you did at your first startup. So obviously your work kind of like correlates very nicely with your athletic endeavors, like your strongman, your former powerlifting. I mean, so how does this kind of like full circle come together to now where you got your PhD and kind of like where you started diving into that?
Yeah, I think I've had this really amazing opportunity to have like almost every facet of my life really tie into this core mission of trying to build more sustainable, more ethical food systems. So I went on to do my PhD at the University of Delaware in chemical and biomolecular engineering. And really, the main problem I was trying to tackle here was how can we turn CO2 into something valuable at a massive scale? So there's a ton of CO2 that is just going to be really difficult to avoid emitting. Like there are certain technologies that can cut down on emissions, but there's always going to be some emissions there. So what do we do about that portion of emissions?
Mm.
So I started to explore the idea of like turning CO2 into materials and then like 3D printing the CO2 and doing some really cool stuff there, turning CO2 into chemicals. But really the main idea that really took off was this idea of converting CO2 into alternative protein
Interesting.
and
Okay.
doing that with renewable electricity to be as sustainable as possible.
Got it.
So the Gates Foundation caught wind of this and got really interested. And around this time as well, NASA had launched this Deep Space Food Challenge to figure out how we're going to feed astronauts on Mars because we can't
Mhm.
pack all of our food with us.
Right.
And you're not going to raise animals and raise livestock on Mars. That's insane.
Yeah.
And it's insane to do on Earth too, but extra
Right.
insane to do it on Mars.
Right. Right.
And one thing we realize is the Martian atmosphere is almost all CO2. It's like over 95% CO2,
Okay.
which is
Okay.
great because we can take that CO2, which is very abundant and easy to get, and then turn it into alternative protein. The basis of almost all the food we eat is carbon. So really, you just need a carbon source like CO2
Right.
to
We're
make it.
carbon-based life forms.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So everything
Right.
we eat would make sense that it's carbon.
Right.
There's some other
Right.
stuff in there, some nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, some
Yeah.
trace minerals, but it's mostly carbon.
Wow.
So
It's just
really,
it's crazy for me, like how like it all just comes down to that one element.
yeah, yeah. And so I really got interested in this idea of what if we did this on Earth too? And the Gates Foundation got really interested in this because they have a lot of interest in making food in like sub-Saharan Africa, where it's
Mm.
really difficult to grow food using conventional methods. But they also have CO2. So if we can take that CO2 and make alternative protein there, and we can also do it in space, we can do it in urban cities. We can do it in the Arctic, do it in these really remote regions where it's otherwise really difficult to grow food and produce protein. And protein is especially difficult to produce just because most people around the world derive their protein from animal products. And that just has resulted in a massive amount of land use to the point where over half of the US is now used for agriculture. Most of that going towards either farmland for livestock or growing the food to feed that livestock. So there's an opportunity to say, hey, maybe we can make these same bioidentical proteins, so the same dairy proteins, the same egg proteins, the same cell cultured proteins, like produce meat in a petri dish. It won't actually be in a petri dish, but in a large bioreactor.
Mhm.
Produce literally these same exact proteins we're already eating without the animal suffering, without the environmental impacts, and using way less land that we can now rewild, reforest. So there's this really great opportunity here to start thinking about alternative proteins and how we can build out this essentially biomanufacturing economy and really rethink our food system from the ground up. Like our food system's already based on CO2. It's not that insane of an idea to rethink how we use that CO2, right? Because if we think about it, animal proteins at some point, like CO2's going into photosynthesis. We all remember from elementary school. Growing the plants. The animals eat those plants. The CO2 goes into them, the carbon from the CO2, and then we take the protein from the animals. What if we like cut out all the middlemen here and just started from CO2 and made our protein more efficiently in a bioreactor? So that's what my research was really based around.
To clarify, because I think you've mentioned this a few times, and I think is for me, it's actually relatively new terrain as well, kind of like understanding alternative proteins. So when you say doing it, like the process of like creating alternative proteins, this is happening kind of like in a laboratory in the bioreactor, and this is kind of like you said, it's cutting out the middle guys, but then it's like going right to the actual source, so to
Yeah,
speak.
so let me explain a little bit. When like bioreactor sounds super scary, it's not. It's just fermentation. That's the same way we make beer, the same way we make wine, same way
Okay.
like bread and a lot of bread and cheese is made. Like instead of feeding sugar to organisms that make alcohol, we're just feeding CO2 and CO2 derivatives to organisms that now make alternative protein.
So how exactly does that work? So you're giving them carbon,
Yeah.
and then I mean,
And
is it
then
a
they feed on
bacteria?
that. Yeah. So that it's bacteria and the
Okay,
microorganisms, they feed on
okay.
that and then produce the protein as a byproduct.
This is mind blowing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's pretty insane.
yeah, it's like I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. So like,
And there's already companies doing this, by the way. They're just not using CO2 yet. They're using sugar.
I
So
see.
I actually use a non-animal whey protein right now. My protein, the company My Protein, has this whey forward line, and all
Okay.
of that whey protein is derived through this fermentation route I've described. And so they're feeding sugar to microorganisms that are making whey, and it's bioidentical whey to the whey you get from dairy
Right.
and from cows, but it's coming from fermentation.
So I mean, would it? How does the body? Let's say somebody's lactose intolerant. For example, I'm
Yeah.
lactose intolerant. So how would I?
So
Uh,
there's no lactose in the whey. Now I will say
right.
like when I first started using that again, my body, like, I hadn't eaten whey in years, so it did like
Yeah.
upset my
Yeah.
stomach a little bit.
Makes sense.
But there's no lactose in it, so there shouldn't be an issue there. But some people do still have problems digesting the whey. The one really interesting thing about this whey, though, is that it had a much higher concentration of leucine than conventional whey from a cow, which is a big deal because that is like
That's a big
the
selling point from all the,
arguably the most
yeah.
important amino acid for muscle growth. It's basically the foreman of all the other amino acids, tells them what to do, how to build the muscle, and is challenging sometimes to get on plant-based diets. But now we have this whey that's being produced through fermentation available, and it has more leucine, literally more leucine than any other animal or non-animal product ever to exist.
This is crazy. Is there a reason why it's so high?
It's just a product of the fermentation process. It's just
So,
how the organisms produce it and how they take the CO2 and construct the amino acid chains.
dude, that's. I mean, there
It's
must
still
be.
whey. They just construct the whey in a slightly different way than a cow's body would, essentially.
Makes sense. So whey, but not whey without lactose, but still whey, and
It
whey
is
with.
still a whey
It's
protein.
still.
It's the
It's still
same
whey.
exact protein. Yeah, it's just a higher concentration of the leucine amino acid in it.
Wow, incredible, incredible. Because that kind of like it basically solves the biggest problem that
Yeah.
vegans,
And that's
vegetarians, or
like
plant
just
based.
one little angle, like, of all these like challenges and unique opportunities there are. And I'll give you another one. If we think about cultured meat, there's a big opportunity. One of the biggest issues with meat health wise is they're high in cholesterol, high in saturated fat. There could be an opportunity to produce, I mean, literally any type of meat you want in through biomanufacturing. Like, say, if you wanted a lion steak, we could make that and then remove the saturated fat and add in like omega 3s from like similar to you'd find in like salmon or something like that. And but now it's in like this lion steak. So there's like these really unique opportunities that you would never find in nature that would be hugely beneficial for athletes, for regular people just trying to watch their health, for people that are just curious and like interesting food.
Right, right.
And it's more efficient. It could lower costs at scale. It removes the environmental concerns. It removes the ethical concerns of mistreating the animals.
Mhm.
So there's like this huge untapped potential there.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And I think that's kind of like what I'm starting to wrap my head around is like, so I mean, we're at the precipice of like a whole new world, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. I think people really are starting to rethink how food needs to work. And we have to, because like I said, we are literally running out of land to produce food the way we're doing it. And more people around the world are starting to want to eat a Western diet that's higher in meat, and population's growing. Like, at this rate, it's clearly not sustainable, not even from an environmental aspect. Like, we will quite literally run out of land, run out of resources to continue to produce our food the way we're doing it. So we have to rethink our food systems.
Right, right. It's just a matter of time now. I
Yeah.
mean, basically, like we're out of time.
Yeah. And I
Gotcha.
did some analysis basically to say, what would it look like if we took my method of using CO2 to build out our entire food system, and if we got all of our protein from that
Mhm,
to
mhm.
meet our dietary needs. And we were able to reduce the land footprint in the US by like 90%. So instead of half of the US, we're now just using a small little portion of like one state to produce all the protein we need, actually all the food we need, which is insane
That is
because
crazy.
that's like, you could take all of that land and just make a massive national park.
Yeah, man, that would be crazy. Wow. So, with regard to food production, then, so if this is the direction that we're potentially headed, I mean, is this something that would be a viable alternative if we were living off Earth, or is this like only an Earth-based thing? Because it sounds like there's options to do it on Mars. It sounds like this is something that potentially we could take with us as a species, like
Yeah, I
wherever we
mean
are.
it's both. Like the reason we're interested in the reason it's interesting, the reason you have to do it this way on Mars is because it's so efficient. Like you just don't have that many resources available to you. Like you have very limited water, you have very limited access to like micronutrients, very limited access to nitrogen that you need. So you have to be as efficient as possible. And
Makes
that's
sense.
how we need to start thinking about producing food on Earth is we need to be as efficient as possible because as I mentioned, we're running out of land because we're trying to produce food in one of the most efficient ways possible by going up all of these trophic levels on the food chain. And every time you go up a trophic level, so like if we go from like grass to like a bird to like a hawk
Sure.
that eats that bird, every
Yeah.
time you go up one of those steps in the food chain, you only retain, like rule of thumb, about 10% of the calories. So
Interesting.
you
Okay.
lose all of that energy every time you go up a step. So if we're starting with corn and growing all of that corn and soybeans to feed a cow, we're only retaining 10% of that ultimately makes its way to the meat and protein we're eating.
In terms of like the nutrient quality and the nutrient density, or just the energy,
Just in terms of energy,
just
which
in
is
general. Okay.
calories. Yeah.
Just calories. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So we
Got it.
could theoretically, if we just ate plants, just rough back of the envelope calculations,
Right.
reduce our land usage by 90%.
Man, would be a different world.
Yeah.
I gotta ask this because I know we opened up the can of worms here, and I kind of feel like this is something that for me it's very interesting, kind of like walking into this new world, and it's something I guess now we're similar. I'm almost a decade not eating any animal products, any meat. So I mean, with meat now being grown in the lab, it's kind of like now the options back on the table for people who want that option, if that makes sense. This is hard
It's
for
going to
me.
split the vegan community for sure. And it might
This is
get to the
yeah, this is
point where
hard.
like
Yeah,
what is veganism now? Like that definition will either adapt to including like these new cell cultured meats
right, right,
or it will just stay as like plant based, like just eating plants.
sure.
And there might be some new word for people that eat plants plus the cell cultured meat or hopefully we won't even need a new term because everybody will just be eating the cell cultured meat and not animals anymore.
Got
But
you.
regardless to me, like it's all just terminology. What it matters to at
Yeah.
the end of the day to me are my ethics. So if it's quote unquote not vegan anymore to eat these cell cultured proteins, that's fine with me. I have no problem giving up the title as long as I'm being consistent with my ethics, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. Yeah, and I think ethics aside, because I think that's very valid. Obviously, that's the whole premise of kind of like the vegan movement. Ethics aside, just for a second, because I know that
Yeah.
that you can get into a whole different rabbit hole. But on the health side, that's where I'm kind of like so curious because it's like from what you're suggesting here, you're basically saying like we can make basically products that don't have the detrimental negative effects that they come with in the normal kind of like standard form. Like for example,
Exactly.
the lion steak or a certain meat product. It's like that's mind blowing. It's like wait a
Yeah,
minute.
we
So
have the opportunity to say, okay, we've identified these compounds as being harmful and carcinogenic that are found in red meat. Let's just take them out of the cell cultured meat and now make a meat product that is actually good for you.
jeez, that flips the script. It
Yeah,
flips the
it
script.
absolutely changes everything.
Well, I mean, and they've done a lot of experimentation on plants and, GMO crops and things like that. So, I mean, on the same side, they could probably do the same thing with enhancing nutrient density and antioxidants and phytochemicals with plants, I would guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of like this other angle too. Is there's right now we have a lot of tools available to us to do genetic modification on plants, but most of them are being used to genetically engineer the plants to be more resistant to pesticides and herbicides so we can just spray the shit out of them.
Right,
And
right.
that's probably not the best use of our ability to genetically modify these plants. The best use would probably be to increase nutrient density, because maybe if we increase the nutrient density, we don't even have to grow as much of them because they're more nutrient dense.
Makes
And
sense.
and then you don't need to worry about, spraying and the harmful, I think there's a lot of discussion about, ideally the stuff they spray is supposed to disappear and degrade by the time it hits market, but it's questionable about whether or not it's actually doing that. So there's a lot of open discussion there, and this is sort of a whole separate can of worms, but
Right.
like
Yeah.
science can do a lot for us, and that's kind of the underlying message here. If we use the tools available to us to actually help society and improve nutrition, they're available to us if we want to use them.
Yeah, so it's a double-edged sword then.
Yeah, I
It's
think
like,
one of the main barriers is there's sort of this like what I call like food neophobia, where food is such a culturally ingrained thing that people are very resistant to change when it comes to their food. And that's one of the big barriers to veganism as well. So
right,
the quicker society can kind of overcome this, and I don't think it's easy because it's really like ingrained in us, like
right,
from evolution, to not eat things that are different because it might kill us, right?
right.
But now we know like it's not going to kill us, but it's different. But it's ingrained in our brains as we've evolved to be afraid of new foods. So
Right.
we have to figure out how to overcome that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I remember listening to Dr. Esselstyn, who you're probably familiar with,
Yeah.
that besides sex and religion, having people change their food or what they eat is probably the hardest thing that we have to do.
It's so difficult. Yeah. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And while I was at the startup, like we did kind of some analysis on this and some surveying of like different regions around the world about their openness to like proteins produced from CO2, and like what types of angles people are actually interested in. And the one thing that like keeps coming back and like it's as actually shown to be quite true in the literature too is like you have to focus more on the fact that they're healthy and sustainable rather than calling them vegan. That title is just scary to a lot of people. But hey, this is a healthy, sustainable protein. More people are generally more interested.
It's a pre-frame, isn't it?
Yeah.
It makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. And I've noticed that as well. Yeah. Especially when you have that frame and people are like, oh, okay, so this is another vegan thing. Versus when I come in and I say, oh, yeah, this is anti-inflammatory.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
exactly.
okay. Oh, yeah. This is longevity.
There's literally been studies, I think, where people were presented with like 2 or 3 meals or something, and they had like 2 groups of people, and one of the meals was labeled vegan in one group, and the other group it was labeled just sustainable. And the people where it was labeled sustainable chose that option way more often. It was the same exact meal, but because it was labeled vegan, people did not choose it.
People freak out with that word, man. Yeah. And it's interesting. Even when I first went vegan, I actually didn't even know what vegan. I knew what vegetarian was, but I never even heard of the word vegan.
Interesting.
So yeah, it is interesting because it's like kind of like it's almost an education gap, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like where it's like you actually got to tell people like this is what this is, or they already have their preconceptions, especially in the age of now social media and AI and everything that we live in now.
Yeah, it's a tough cultural moment I think for veganism right now, but the way I've seen things go like this over the years is like when things swing very far in one direction, and right now it's definitely swinging towards animal products, it will swing back.
There has to be that balance.
So we need to be ready for it. Yeah, when that does swing back.
So we talked about strongman before, and obviously you got the Worlds coming up. So I want to just touch on this for a few minutes here. So 2025 was a pretty solid year for you for your strongman wins, right?
Yeah. So let me think back here. So to kick off 2025. That is at the beginning of the year. That was my debut at the Arnold. So the Arnold World Championships. It's one of the biggest competitions in strongman. So I was super excited just to even be there, and ended up finishing in like the top 50%, which was an awesome debut because, yeah, just being there is an honor. And I'm hoping to go back next year is my plan.
That's the one you got 3 wins and 2 second places before that, or?
I think that was East Coast's.
East Coast,
Strongest Natural Man. So after that, I went on to win East Coast Strongest Natural Man. And then from there, qualified for Worlds. That's where I did not end up making weight, which was unfortunate. But I was still like within the top 5 throughout the entire competition and like winning events. So actually kind of a funny story is, so I didn't make weight, but they were like, hey, you can still compete as an exhibition lifter. And I actually asked if I could just go up a weight class, and they said no, which was unfortunate. So I had to compete as an exhibition lifter, which meant my lifts didn't count. But they made the mistake of leaving me in the scoreboard. So I kept winning events, and they were like, oh, no, we got to take him out of the scoreboard because it's like confusing the other competitors, because I don't think they expected me to do that well. Just because
who's this guy getting all these wins?
Yeah. So then like they took me out of this. This was a 2-day competition. They took me
This is
out of the
awkward.
scoreboard, and the people showed up on the next day and were very confused because everything had like shuffled around. They're like, what happened?
Where's that guy that was like at the top?
Yeah, yeah. And then the other thing that happened, which was frustrating, is the way it works in strongman is at Worlds, they run multiple lanes at once. So there's like heats. So if you win the previous event, you get to be in the last heat. So since I was used to being in the last heat against like the most competitive guys the first day, and then they took me out of the scoreboard, I started to have to go in the first heat, which sucked because what would end up happening is like I would be the only one that's able to finish the event, and then it would go through like all of the heats until the last heat, and then nobody would literally finish the event until it got to the last heat. So it just looked very odd.
What's it called? A heat?
Yeah. So I think most people are probably familiar with this in like Olympic swimming or like Olympic track. It's just like rounds of people because you can't have everyone
Got
compete
it.
at the same time, but they'll
Got
have
it.
like 4 or 5 guys go at the same time. It's like, okay, then the
Okay.
next heat. And
Got it.
strategically, you want to be with like the most competitive guys so you can kind of see out of the corner of your eye what they're doing and have like a good benchmark and be able to see everyone else go before you. So I had
Gotcha.
to like set that bar basically being in the first heat. And then people literally wouldn't finish the event because it was too hard until we got to the very last
Shoot.
heat. And then they were trying to beat me. So it was weird.
This is crazy. So whoever goes in that first heat is kind of like setting the standard for everyone else.
Essentially, yeah. Yeah.
Got it.
But
Got it.
usually
Yeah,
the people in the first heat have done poorly, and that's why they're in the first heat. But it
I
was so
see.
it was strange for
The
me to be
switch
like
around.
winning events and then have to go in the first heat.
Got it. Got it. Well, I mean, how are you feeling with the Worlds coming up then?
I feel the best I have ever felt, honestly. Like
Okay.
it's gotten to the point where I know my strength is where it needs to be to win the competitions I want to win. It's just a matter of like execution and like the littlest of tiny things. Like the thing about strongman is every single competition is different as opposed to
Mhm.
powerlifting where it's always squat, bench, deadlift
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
order.
Big three. Yeah.
Whereas strongman is like the event order changes, like the events themselves change. Like no 2 events are ever alike. Like I might have a max log and then see a log again, but maybe that log will be for reps, or maybe it will be like a circus dumbbell and then a log and then an axle, or like the
Got it.
implement itself, it'll be a natural log or a metal log. So like
Yeah.
even the implements themselves are never the same. So you
Wow.
just don't know what to expect. So you kind of have to be ready for anything and kind of hope everything kind of comes together perfectly on competition day and you don't make any little mistakes, because it's like the tiniest of things that can make a difference. And I'll give an example. So I just competed at nationals,
Mhm.
Natural USA Strongest Man, and I was like neck and neck with like my main competitor. The whole competition kind of going back and forth, like a half-point difference between the two of us. And we got to the last event, and it was a sandbag carry for distance. So it was a 280-pound sandbag, and you had to carry it as far as you could in a minute. And I made the decision of trying to pick it off the ground as quick as I could because I wanted to play like mental games with him basically and beat him out the gate. So hopefully he would be like defeated mentally.
Okay. Use a little bit of his ATP storage quickly.
Yeah, that and just kind of like make him feel bad that, oh, he's already ahead of me, like I'm not going to catch
Yeah.
up type thing.
Yeah.
And that's not what I had done in training. In training, I'd really taken my time with that sandbag to make sure I got a good grip on it, because you don't want to drop it during the minute,
Right.
or you're done. So that was a risky move, and I did beat him out of the gate, and I was ahead of him for like a good couple laps, and then it got to the point where it was like, shit, my grip is slipping because I made this decision, which ended up not working out. And he
Shit.
beat me by like a few feet and ended up winning, and I took second. But I'll see him again at
Got it.
Worlds.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I beat him actually at East Coast's Strongest Natural Man. So like there's this back and forth now, and it's like
This
the
is cool.
littlest of tiny decisions on comp day that make the difference like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like just
No, it
how
makes
quickly
sense.
I picked up the sandbag for this event mattered.
Yeah, the small hinges, right?
Yeah.
They move the big doors. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of cool though, because you kind of have like a rival going at this.
Yeah, I do, which is fun because we're really like pushing each other, and hopefully like there's never been, to my knowledge, anybody in my weight class from the US that's won. Actually, I don't know if there's been anybody from the US that's won Natural Worlds yet.
Wow.
So it's cool. We're both trying to like push each other to be like, represent the US on the world stage there.
Dude, that's awesome. I mean, out of curiosity, do you know which country has the most amount of kind of like natural strongmen?
Probably UK, England, I'd say. Yeah.
Really? Wow. I was not gonna. I was thinking like Germany or like some like East European country or something like that?
No, strongman's massive in the UK. Like they fill stadiums for strongman there.
This is nuts. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha, gotcha. I guess a rugby influence,
Like the
maybe.
US has a lot of really strong guys and we're super competitive, but we also have a massive population. The UK is a much smaller population, but way more guys that are super into strongman. And there's just way
Wow.
more strongman gyms over there.
Jeez, wow, wow, wow. I
So it's a
guess you
very
learn something new.
yeah, like Western European centric sport.
Got it. Got it. Well, I mean, you got your career, you got, the strongman, you got the worlds coming up. I mean, how do you balance it all together, man?
It's a lot. I mean, the other thing I do on the side too, I haven't mentioned at all, is I work a lot with what's called the Plant Built team.
Hmm.
So we're a collective of like elite vegan athletes from all around the world, and we get together and do like one big competition every other year, and just go in and dominate essentially. And we have bodybuilders, we have strongmen, powerlifters, we have some like kettlebell sporters, crossfitters, Olympic lifters. And so from like all the strength sports, and the idea is just to prove to everybody like vegans can compete with the best of the best in
Hmm.
strength, and we go and do that. So I'm super excited to be a part of that, and I'm the captain of their strongman team.
Nice.
And then I recently joined the board of the nonprofit Vegan Strong, which I'm super excited about. And so they kind of work a lot with Plant Built. They go and set up. So they're going to be like at the Arnold Sports Festival this year. That just got announced actually,
Nice.
and we're going to go and like interact with people at this very like meathead type sporting event in Columbus, Ohio.
Sweet.
And it's the biggest sporting event in strength sports and in the world. And we've always gotten like a lot of like super positive reception there from people. Like it's insane the number of people that come up to you and like, oh, I thought about being vegan, and like I know so and so's that is vegan, but I didn't realize you could be vegan and be strong. And
Hmm.
it like opens the door up for people to start at least thinking about like, oh, this is actually doable. And I
Right.
now there's this reason I've had forever of like, oh, you can't be strong and vegan. That's gone. So I
Mm.
can't use that as a justification anymore. So
Damn
hopefully
it.
getting them one more mental step closer
Yeah.
to going vegan.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, on top of everything else you're doing, so you're the captain of that. You just got on the board there. So, I mean, so is there secret? Are there standards? Like, are there non-negotiables? Like, do you have to train? Like, what's your standard for your health then?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to get my training in. I I lift heavy like 4 days a week, and then sometimes five, and when I'm deep in the off season and really need to push my volume. But I'm always moving. Like on my off days, it's not like just a lay around day. It's I go on walks. I'm doing yoga. I'm doing mobility work. So those are
Nice.
are non-negotiables for me, and I always make sure to block out my training sessions.
Mm.
And then from there, it's just a lot of time management to make sure I get done everything I need to get done.
Mm.
Because it is a lot, and it definitely gets overwhelming. And I coach, so on the additionally on top of all this, I also coach. I particularly am super interested in coaching other vegan strongmen,
Nice.
and trying to guide them through the sport to get as many vegans in the sport as we can. And I'd argue out of all the strength sports, we have like the highest concentration of super high performing vegans in strongman right now.
Compared to everything, even bodybuilding and
I'd
other
say
strength
so.
sports?
So like the
Really? Wow.
most successful natural strongman in the world, Tom Butts, is vegan, and he's won 3 times. So literally has
Wow.
won World's Strongest Natural Man more than anybody else, and he's
Jeez.
vegan.
Wow. Wow. Jeez. Did not know that. So that's
And
the
then
big.
the other big name I want to throw out too is Angeline Burba. She just won the official Strongman Games European's Strongest Woman
And she's
last
vegan.
year. Yeah,
Wow.
and she's
Jeez.
vegan. So Europe's
Jesus.
strongest woman is vegan. She's won France's strongest woman like 5 times. She
Wow.
won like the Static Monsters World Championship, which is kind of like the powerlifting equivalent of strongman, where it's a max deadlift and a max log. And
Right.
she's won that, I think, twice now as well. So we have all these like super dominant vegans coming through strongman. And part of
This
the
is
reason I
crazy.
really want to get to heavyweight is like, I feel like what we're missing are like, we just need some really big guys to come in, like Patrick Baboumian, because
Okay.
everybody wants to see the giants, and like
Yeah.
that's what we're missing right now is we have like a lot of these super athletic weight class strongmen,
Mhm.
but we need some of these bigger guys to step in to prove that can be done on a vegan diet too, because it can.
Patrick's awesome. Yeah, he would be a cool guy to bring on. Wow. So definitely breaking some myths here. I mean, even for me, I was like, I didn't even know like we had so many like vegan, like strong men and women at so many high levels.
Yeah, yeah. And like there's a lot of powerlifters out there too. But I would argue, having competed in both sports, that the vegan strongmen are making a lot more waves right now. But there's a lot
Gotcha.
of great vegan powerlifters and bodybuilders. Like, don't get me wrong out there. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, in terms of the total proportion of athletes, there seem to be a lot more vegans and strongmen right now.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Makes sense. Makes sense. So, I mean, man, you wrote a book, tell me a little bit about that. You wrote the book, The Living Machine, Engineering Strength with a Plant-Based Diet. So, I mean, this comes from your own experience. What's it about?
Yeah, so I wrote this book during COVID because I had nothing else to do and I was going insane, and I was wrapping up my bachelor's in chemical engineering at the time. So I've learned a ton since I wrote this book, and I always want to caveat that. Not that there's anything particularly wrong in the book, but I definitely have ideas that have become more complex, and I
Mhm.
plan to write another book at some point. I don't know when. But I wrote this book because at the time I was like, there's not any good resources out there for somebody who wants to be strong and vegan and build muscle mass. And it's gotten a
Mhm.
lot better since I wrote this book, for sure. There are a lot
Mhm.
more resources out there and things to point to. But this book was written, like, if I remember correctly, like either around the time where I was like writing it as the Game Changers was coming out. So like that even wasn't even like out there in vegan world.
There's just a different world. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Makes
nobody
sense.
really, it was the book that I would have wanted when I started in strength sports as a vegan, because it does require you, like, I think when the biggest mistake people make when they go vegan, particularly those who are trying to compete in strength sports, is they take what they're eating already and they just remove the animal products and leave
Mm.
everything else. And that's
Right.
that's not the way a vegan diet should work optimally. You have to introduce
Right.
new foods to
Right.
replace those products, not just remove them and then eat higher portions of what you were eating already.
Right.
So you need to get those high protein diets and do it in a healthy way, the
Mhm.
best that you can. And the other angle I really tried to get at with this book, besides kind of showing how you structure a vegan diet to be strong and build muscle mass, was starting to explore, like, are there potential benefits actually to being vegan in strength sports? And what would those look like? And I don't think they're fully fleshed out yet, but I started to explore like a couple ideas that I think, first principles kind of thinking, we'll say. Whereas, like, yeah, it probably makes sense that if you eat a diet higher in antioxidants and everything else is equivalent, the athlete that eats more antioxidants, which are found in much higher proportion in plant foods, is probably
Mhm.
going to be successful if everything else is kept equal.
Makes
So like
sense.
there's a,
Yeah.
there's a strong argument there. The other really interesting argument, where, and this is kind of the reason I titled the book the way I did, like viewing the body as a machine, was
Mm.
taking my engineering background to understand how the body works. And where this kind of comes into play is, in engineering, there's this concept of viscosity, which is essentially resistance to flow. So something with a higher viscosity is going to be thick. So think like honey or agave is really thick. It has a high viscosity. Whereas
Right.
water
Right.
flows super easy, so there's a low viscosity. And from engineering, we know when you have a high viscosity fluid and put it through a pump, that pump has to work so much harder to move it,
Mhm.
which makes sense, right? It's
Yeah.
hard to pump honey or agave, but pretty easy to pump water.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the same principle applies when you eat high quantities of saturated fat and cholesterol. That quite literally thickens your blood
Mhm.
and increases the viscosity of your blood. So your blood's now thicker after you eat, a meal that's high in animal products.
Mhm.
And your heart now has to work a lot harder. And it's a lot more difficult for the oxygen and the nutrients in your blood now to transfer into your muscles.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there's some really good studies on this showing that, athletes are they do much better when their blood viscosity is lower. And having that high blood viscosity is a big deal in trying to recover quickly. And ultimately, it's the strength athletes that can recover more quickly between sessions and then train harder that end up doing better. So having kind of this combination of a high antioxidant diet and not increasing your blood viscosity to the point it's hard to recover are two really critical factors to improving recovery time. And that's kind of, two of the lenses I looked at for how a vegan diet could potentially be more beneficial than a conventional omnivorous diet for strength training.
Makes sense. And I mean, the pre-frame again, and we were talking about this earlier with, it's like, all right, so what's the pre-frame, right? Is this a sustainable diet or is this a vegan diet? It's like, all right, a vegan diet, I'm out of here, right? But it's like, well, a blood viscosity diet where you enhance and elevate performance and you're able to get, I mean, that's a big thing with strength sports, is that the more total volume you're able to accumulate during a training week, the more muscle damage you're going to be able to inflict, or when it comes to powerlifting or strongman, the more strength you'll be able to build. It's like, well, duh, don't I want to actually get more training volume in then? But
Yeah,
then in order
exactly.
to get the training volume, then
You
you
have to
actually have to get
recover.
the recover.
Yeah, you can't
It's
train
like,
again until you've recovered from the last session.
right,
So if you can recover quicker and do more in your training sessions, you're going to get stronger if everything else is, held equal. So that's sort of the idea there. And if you think about it, people that are eating an omnivorous diet, most people eat like 3 times a day, and that saturated fat and cholesterol, that stays in your blood for quite a few hours. So your blood viscosity is kept high for most of the day and for a good part of the time you're sleeping just by eating, regular meals.
mm, quote unquote,
Yeah,
yeah, regular meals, yeah, makes sense. Wow, I mean, this is such an interesting angle, and I feel like we could spend a lot more time on this, but I think it's so what's unique. It's such a great pre-frame where it's like, all right, well, athletes, right, just general athletes, like, hey, you guys want to train and recover harder? Well, hey, let's take care of your blood viscosity. And they're like, what'd you call me? Like, no, I said your blood viscosity. Like, that's what we want to work on. And yeah, it's a game changer.
definitely, definitely.
Awesome. Well, what do you think about kind of like the direction we're headed with all protein? Do you feel like this is kind of like a positive direction, neutral? Are we kind of like, where you mentioned kind of like the pendulum's on one side, it's got to swing back around?
I think we're at a point where we can be cautiously optimistic, and I tend to be more of an optimist. And kind of no matter where that pendulum's at, I'm going to continue working to advance what I believe in. So when the opportunities are ripe, then we can come in and make the most progress possible. And that's kind of how I think about things. Is like even when society and the culture and things aren't kind of going your way, you can continue working in the background. So when things do shift, you can make the maximum impact possible.
Makes
And that's
sense.
sort of what I'm trying to position myself for, and what a lot of people thinking about these issues are trying to position themselves for. So, although right now, like, we seem to be dominated by this ethos of like, you have to eat a maximal amount of animal protein and cook your steak in butter, like, that pendulum is going to swing back, and we
Right.
need to be ready for it.
Right. Yeah, it makes
And
sense.
people like that go adopt that diet, they're going to encounter issues if they sustain it over an extended period of time. So we need to be ready to like catch them when they realize it's not working for them and say, hey, there's actually this alternative in plant-based diets that you should try that's going to allow you to be healthy and strong and accomplish the things you want to accomplish. And it's very different from what you're doing before, but it will get you to the goals that you're interested in.
Makes sense. Yeah. Just like, quietly biding our time, but it's interesting because you said the word consequences are kind of like, the impact. And it's kind of like, there's an impact. There's a price to pay for everything,
Yeah,
right? So it's like if we're
definitely.
choosing a certain path, I mean, there will be certain results. There will be certain like quote unquote consequences, and the same vice versa here. That's like you're fueling your body with more antioxidants and phytochemicals and vitamins. Well, I mean, there's a consequence for that too. It's a pretty good one.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes sense. Well, out of curiosity, I know that we're starting to wrap up here. Is there, like, if you could, I guess, summarize like one or two pieces of advice that you give to somebody, who has a busy career, they have, family, but they still want to be strong, they want to be fit using plants, they want to be fit using exercise. Is there anything that you would tell that person?
And it's hard to boil down, but I would say like the biggest thing that ends up mattering for actually building muscle mass and building strength is consistency. So I think everybody has this notion of, oh, I'm going to go to the gym 6-7 times this week and hit things really hard because it's the new year or whatever. I have this new goal, and then they burn out so quick.
Mm,
So I think starting slow and doing something you can sustain matters a lot. And that applies both to training and diet. So, maybe you can only maintain 3 days a week, but if you do that throughout the entire year, rather than just, hitting it really hard for a few weeks and then burning out, you're going to get way more progress. And the same thing
mm,
applies to diet. If, you feel like, everyone always say, I could go vegan except for cheese, then go vegan except for cheese. Do what you can do. And then
right.
later, if you find, oh, there's actually a lot of good vegan cheese options out there, that I'm figuring out and figure out that I like, implement those later. Like, do what you can do now and sustain it over a longer period of time. And that's going to get you way more positive results rather than trying to go to the extreme for a short period and burning out.
Makes sense. The consistency over perfection.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else you'd add or share? Would you say that sums it up?
I'd say that about sums it up. And the other note I always like to leave people on is like, if the reason you're afraid to go vegan is because you're afraid you can't be strong and build muscle mass, that is absolutely not true. And I'm proof of that. And there are hundreds of other athletes I can point to that are proof of that. So that
Yes.
is absolutely not a concern and not something you need to be worried about.
And you certainly don't look like you're on deathbed or falling apart right now.
Definitely not. After 8 or 9 years, I'm stronger than ever.
Man, I got one main question for you before we close out. But real quick, before I ask that, if somebody wanted to support you, they wanted to follow your work, they want to follow around with the worlds and your athletic endeavors, what would be the best place to go to?
Best place to go to would be my Instagram at Vegan Hercules.
Vegan Hercules.
Yep.
Got you. And just straight, no underscore, nothing, just
No
Vegan
underscore,
Hercules.
just Vegan Hercules.
Got it. Understood. Well, here's a question, man. You mentioned, I think, in your bio, you have an upcoming documentary coming up.
Yeah, so this has been a really cool project I've been working on with Ryan Rakes, and he's super humble, but like, so probably hate I'm doing this, but he's done some really amazing work over the years. He's worked on like Orange is the New Black. He's worked with The Rock. He's worked on doing like ads for like Lego and Nike, and he's putting together this documentary called Ironbound. And there's not a release date for it yet, but it'll probably be out, if not this year, early next year. And he's followed around like a whole host of vegan strength athletes, including myself, across bodybuilding, across strongman, across powerlifting. And he's literally been following to my competitions for like 2 years now. So
Wow.
everything from like the Arnold to Worlds to Nationals, like he's been following me and like capturing my journey. He came to my startup and was like, filming there. So we were talking about like all the cool alternative protein stuff. And I think this is like going to be like the biggest vegan documentary that has come out in a long time. And I'm hoping it'll have a massive impact to really shift the culture because he's doing some amazing work and has got some really incredible people into this documentary.
Dude, that sounds amazing. Wow. I mean, you got me excited just thinking about that. You think it's
Yeah.
going to be like on the stage of like Game Changers or something like that?
That's the plan. And basically like the Game Changers did a good job of highlighting kind of a lot of athletes that have come up through the ranks and have had very successful careers, but most of them have kind of like were at the end of their career and had retired. Ryan has done a really great job of capturing these athletes literally at their peak and as they're coming up, like meeting them where they're at the highest level of competition, which is a really unique framing. So I'm really excited for how this comes out. And yeah, that's the plan is, I don't want to speak too much on his behalf and his plans, but yeah, ultimately we're trying to maximize exposure, get this on streaming services. So that's the other thing I'll plug is he has an Instagram and he's fundraising for this documentary right now. And he's raised quite a bit of money. But obviously, he travels all around the world, so the more money he can raise, the better to prove the quality of this documentary. So I'm pulling up the Instagram right now for the documentary, and there's been some footage released already. Yeah, it's literally at Project Ironbound. So everyone
Wow.
should go
Okay.
check that out.
Nice. Yeah, definitely check that out. So you said Project Ironbound, correct?
Yep, at Project Ironbound.
Amazing. Yeah, definitely check that out. I mean, and Brady's going to be in it, so this is going to be really cool to follow you in the film. And dude, man, we got to stay in touch about that. I'm really excited to hear about that. Awesome. Awesome. Well, Bradie, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your insights, your experience with us. If you'd like to engineer strength using a plant-based diet, I'd suggest getting a copy of Dr. Bradie's book on Amazon. I already have it on my reading list, so I'm looking forward to diving into it. And yeah, man, I'm going to leave all of your social stuff in the show notes. So if you'd like to connect with Dr. Bradie, again, Vegan Hercules on Instagram, all that stuff will be attached in the show notes. Bradie, any last words before we close out here?
No, I mean, just if anybody has questions about anything, honestly, just shoot me a DM on Instagram, and I'm super receptive to getting back to you.
Awesome. And you mentioned that you're doing, you have the vegan kind of like strongman coaching, correct? So they can reach out
Yeah,
to you. They can
I do
talk to you there.
coach primarily strongman, but also strength athletes in general, and super interested in coaching vegan athletes, especially.
Amazing. Amazing. So guys, check it out. Go on Instagram, hit up Bradie. Brady's a busy guy, so I don't know how many spots he's gonna have open. But
I might be
Bra-
slow, but I will get back to you at some point.
thanks, man. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate the wisdom, and yeah, we definitely got to have a catch up after you do the worlds later on this year.
For sure. Appreciate it, Gabriel.
Awesome, man.